Presidents, a real podcast about, well, you know.
Each episode will take a deep dive into a fictional American president from pop culture to see just how much fiction there really is.
We're two former political junkies who do like talking about politics. We just don't like talking about actual, real-world politics.
Yeah, because it's just too damn depressing.
I'm Eric Buckman, a very former political consultant turned former TV writer? I don't know what I do anymore.
I mean, we're all, there's different levels of pivot going on in our industry right now. And I'm Ben Oren, a former journalist, sometimes speechwriter, and all-the-time TV producer.
And on this episode, we're going to go on a little bit of a time hop. We're going to do a movie that was made in the year 2000 that's seemingly set around the year 2010-ish. But only with references from the 1990s.
Correct.
And that movie is The Contender. Not to be confused with Sylvester Stallone's reality competition boxing series, The Contender.
The Contender.
Yeah, it was like The Apprentice meets boxing.
Yeah.
What'd you think, Ben? You like the movie? Yes? No?
We're not a movie review podcast, Eric.
I keep forgetting.
But I've always enjoyed this movie. I remember
Yeah.
I saw it when it came out back in the day. It's a good little drama.
Yeah, it was a listener suggestion. I now see why it came in, suggested. It was a far more interesting...
because there's a fake president in it.
Well, yeah.
That's mainly why things get suggested to us, is because the project has a fake president in it.
Yeah, well, I guess what I mean is when I first saw it, it came out in theaters. I saw it in theaters, and my reaction was that, this movie in 2000 is so closely tied to the events of just a year or two prior that it felt almost too soon and also unnecessary.
I see that. When I saw it, my feeling was, I feel like one day I'm going to do a podcast about it.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was the fall of 2000. And I'm like, coming out of it, I threw out my popcorn because I'm like a good audience member. When you go to the movies, You should always throw out your popcorn, your garbage, whatever. That's your gig, your job, your duty. And I thought to myself, I would love to talk about this with my college buddy, Eric Buckman. But not now.
No.
Not now. I'm going to let him marinate. See what happens with technology.
Yes.
And then we could talk about it on a podcast. I should have trademarked the term podcast, though. That was probably my biggest mistake.
Yes, because you were on an iMac, and you're like, wow, wouldn't it be cool if this iMac was somehow more portable and smaller and could fit in my pocket, like some sort of other device?
Yeah, and I was like, even though I haven't listened to the radio in ages to listen to, non-music, I'm like, what if there could be, an old-timey radio show where people just talk?
Oh, sure.
That's what I wish I would have had in my life in the fall of 2000.
Well, it's interesting because, look, obviously this is a little bit of a tangent, but I think it's somewhat related to the time period this
on our
made.
Podcast? A tangent?
We're pretty tangent freak. Look, there's a reason why most of our episodes clock in under an hour. We cut out
all the tangents.
Most of them. What's interesting to the time period is this movie came out at a point where talk radio was basically the new right-wing propaganda machine that was out there.
Rush Limbaugh.
Yeah, Rush Limbaugh. He fused basically this attitude of a sports talk show host with that of a political, pundit, and created this kind of sports-centric take on politics that kind of took over talk radio throughout the 90s. And by the time this movie came out, people who maybe weren't into the whole Rush thing, or the Rush Ditto heads, I think is what they were called.
They were Ditto heads.
Yeah, when also his clones. Oh, no, Jim Rohn had the clones. But I mean the clones of the format.
Yeah.
Basically what I'm trying to say is Ben and I were probably in the audience for people yearning for a way to listen to people talk about things other than what Rush was talking about. But it did not exist until podcasting came along.
No,
but
that's not true. There was America,
Air America came out after, in a weird...
Gore,
actually,
right after Gore. Wasn't that Gore's big project?
That was the internet. You're confusing the internet with Air.
He knew he wanted to do Air America, but first he knew he had to invent the internet.
Air America was an attempt, and I think kind of almost too late. I feel like that was mid-2000s, after the internet had started to kind of destabilize the need for radio at all. It was their attempt to do a left-wing answer to right-wing talk radio. Did not work, because there really wasn't an audience for it at that point. But what's interesting is it did at least give us
Mark
Maron. Yeah.
That was some good brain meld right there, Eric.
I'll call him one of the pioneers of early podcasting to create a subgenre that was then taken over by right-wing talking heads.
He was actually sued by the person who claimed to like invent podcasting, or at least
like him and like Bill Simmons and Adam Carolla. They were all sued by some guy who back in the 90s wanted to deliver magazine subscriptions via CD-ROM. And so he claimed that...
Which is podcasting, as we all know.
Well, and so somehow the digital distribution of magazine articles became, I invented podcasting, even though it's just a patent. It's a patent troll. And that's one of the things that maybe this country should reform, is how patents work, because it's too easy to just write something down and then one day, 20 years later, claim it was your idea that someone else actually did the thing that you kind of maybe almost did not never do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My name is Andrew Shepard, and I am the president.
So Rod Lurie, he's the writer-director behind this. I guess we should also maybe talk about some other people who went in and making this movie.
Who made it? I mean, can we talk about Rod for a sec?
What's there to say?
I mean, it was his second movie, his second fake president.
And not his last.
The thing is, looking at his credits, I thought I would have seen a lot more work. Even with his TV show, I thought some of his TV shows were on longer than they actually were.
I first got exposed to him when I was first starting off in this business, and I was reading scripts for other people for like staffing purposes, reading a pilot he'd written about West Point, because apparently he was a West Point graduate.
To West Point, yeah.
Yeah, and everything else was a pretty good pilot. That show did not get picked up, but it did, I think, lead to Commander-in-Chief, which stars Gina Davis as a vice president who gets elevated to a role of...
Commander-in-Chief.
Which maybe one day we'll talk about.
I thought that was on longer also. Or maybe I was confusing it with another show.
That's a show it feels like it was on longer.
You know what? I know exactly what show I'm confusing it with. The one with Taya Leone.
Oh, yes. You're confusing it with Madam Secretary.
Yes.
Who also becomes president by the end. But that took like many, many, many seasons. Commander-in-Chief felt like it was on longer than it was, because if you were living and working in Hollywood at the time, it got a lot of press, a lot of backstage drama on that show. It went through multiple showrunners. Steve Bochco, NYPD Blue fame, was brought in at one point to, I think, replace Rod Lurie, or maybe replace the person who replaced Rod Lurie.
Not to replace Gina Davis, because that would have changed everything if all of a sudden Stephen Bochco was like playing the vice president, the female vice president.
Yeah, no, Rod Lurie, director, writer. Joan Allen is the ostensible lead.
So Joan Allen, she plays Senator Lane Billings Hanson, who we already know from the beginning is a Democrat.
Yes.
From Ohio. Obviously, there's Gary Oldman. He plays Representative Shelley Runyon from Illinois, a Republican. We have our president, played by Jeff Bridges.
A Democrat.
Democrat. Jackson Evans, President Jackson Evans. And in a reunion from The Big Lebowski, we got Sam Elliott as his chief of staff, Kermit.
Okay, I'm glad you got chief of staff out there. I could not figure out his role based on the movie itself. Like, I couldn't tell if he was like the face of the administration, like he was a chief of staff, or if he was more of a behind-the-scenes fixer type.
Or maybe his husband.
Or, yeah, he could have been the first. We never met a first lady, did we?
There was no first lady.
Wow. That just goes to show you how well this movie handled the politics, because I watched it yesterday, all of it, and it's not till today, 24 hours later, that I'm like, oh, wait a second. We learned...
Nothing. The only time we even could have seen his wife would have been at the state dinner at the end, because all of his scenes were in the White House and in the Oval Office, hard at work.
Huh.
There's Christian Slater, plays a young congressman from Delaware. Webster, a very young Webster. It's this Webster of a certain generation. Webster only makes you think of one thing.
Yes,
Emmanuel Lewis. We have a pre-CSI, post
Fear.
Not Silence of the Lambs. What was it? Manhunter?
Oh, Manhunter from the 80s. I'm thinking of Fear.
Yeah.
William Peterson. In the late 90s, he was in that Mark Wahlberg, Reese Witherspoon thriller. Fear. Yeah. He was
he played the roller coaster.
Protective dad.
Oh, he didn't play the roller coaster?
No.
Oh, William Peterson could do anything. Mike Binder, who I've always enjoyed as a performer and a writer, plays a lead.
Yeah, my Mike Binder... experience is basically limited to his early HBO series, Mind of a Married Man.
Mind of the Married Man.
Which when I watched, I was not married. And I'm like, oh, maybe this doesn't appeal to me because I'm not married.
And then during your rewatch that you did for your Mind of a Married Man rewatch podcast?
What's it called when you rewatch things in your brain without actually watching it? You just think back to it. And you realize I'm now married and for many years, and that show still has no applicable moments to my life.
A very specific kind of married man. Well, he's in the movie, and so is Saul Rubinek as a press secretary, Jerry Tolliver.
Get off my plane.
So we'll get into the plot. The movie opens, there's no vice president. Vice president's dead.
Dead.
We never find out how or why.
I would guess, based off of, even though Kermit, Sam Elliott, lovingly calls the president old man, Jeff Bridges in the year 2000 ain't really an old man, doesn't look like an old man, looks damn good. So I would assume that his vice president would have been a much older man to help sway certain voters towards him in the first two elections, because we also know it's his second term.
It's the second term. Presumably the vice president was there for the first term as well. We're in the swan song period of this presidency. He's already thinking about his legacy.
Funny you say swan song, because the song in the beginning of the movie is sung by Jeff Bridges. Not as the president, but as Jeff Bridges.
But yeah, so the movie opens with this governor played by William Peterson, and he's in a boat talking to a reporter. They're bass fishing under a bridge, and all of a sudden a car comes careening off of the bridge into the water. And while the nervous reporter is trying to get out his flip phone, his 90s era flip phone, to figure out how to dial 911, I don't know how to dial 911. The governor jumps into action. He jumps in, he goes down, and he starts trying to open the door to save the woman who's trapped inside the car. But he actually doesn't manage to open the door. So despite his heroic efforts witnessed by this reporter, she dies.
Yeah.
But that said, because we know there's an open VP vacancy, he's now thrust into the top spot through his heroics.
He is on the very, very short list.
Yes, a short list of presumably two people, because at this point, we don't even know that there is another contender. But we do meet him. We meet the president through a meeting with through this Governor Hathaway and President Evans with Sam Elliott. And what do they tell him, Ben?
You're a hero. You're great. We love your work. But what we don't need right now is a Chappaquiddick. He's like, Hey, I wasn't drunk. I'm not a Teddy Kennedy. I wasn't like womanizing. I was just bass fishing with a reporter and the car careened and I tried my best. And they're like, sorry. Don't look at us. That's what the Republicans are going to say.
Yeah.
And we want this to be a smooth confirmation, because he's got other parts of his legacy that he wants to cement. Like all good presidents, he's got the crime bill coming up. All presidents got the crime bill. Has an actual president ever had a crime bill, or is a crime bill only a bill that fake presidents have?
No, remember mid-90s. Basically, the thing that became like a pockmark on the Clinton campaign of 2016 is the idea that they passed a law in the mid-1990s, even though she wasn't president then, but her husband signed a law that I guess kind of, maybe possibly created the term super predator.
Ooh, a super predator, you say. But anyway, Hathaway, he's disappointed, but he gets it, and he'll support anybody. Evans gives him the whole spiel. You're still the future of the party. Just got to let this play out. But the president is like very cavalier about it. Like he is, I believe he is eating. He is smoking a cigarette. He blows smoke rings during it.
Yeah.
Jackson Evans doesn't want Hathaway. That's not what he wants his legacy to be.
He definitely has someone in mind. They threw out this name, someone named Malloy. We never meet a Malloy, but apparently this Malloy guy is the person who everyone feels like before Hathaway's incident on the river, this Malloy, he was the future. He's the guy who everyone agrees it would be easy confirmation, stick him in. He's the actual future of the party, but Evans doesn't want him. Evans doesn't want him. Why? Because Malloy's too ambitious. He doesn't want a guy coming in for the number 2 job who only wants the job that Jackson currently has.
Even if it's only for 18 months.
Even if it's only for 18 months, yeah. He doesn't want anyone who's going to overshadow him. So that's another way he's looking to protect his legacy in a bit. We'll also do find out he wants somebody named Hanson. So all we know is the name Hanson. We cut from that scene with the presidents, with Rubinek and Elliott. Call Hanson. And so we hear a phone ring in an office while a rather handsome 40-something man is currently having sex with a lady. We don't see either of their faces. The man answers the phone. Hanson here.
We like this Hanson guy. He gets it on. He's dashing. This is the guy that should be vice president is what we're all thinking.
He immediately comes across very Kennedy-esque. I mean, JFK-esque, not currently Kennedy.
Maybe,
but yeah.
We don't know his feelings on vaccinations.
But yeah, he comes off very Kennedy-esque. He's like, this is Hansen. Yes, I'll hold, please. And then he says, yes, sir. I've got her right here. And he hands the phone over to the woman he was having sex with. It's like, it's for you. And she answers the phone. This is Senator Hansen. Yeah, they try to hide her face just enough so that way you're not thinking, oh, there's Joan Allen, so obviously it's for her. But yeah, she answers the phone. It's like, oh, look, actually, it was the woman he was having sex with. Who's the important person? Who's the VP? Yeah, and so she gets the call. And from there, it's smooth sailing. Like, he wanted an easy confirmation. He got it. And so I guess now we can just talk about the politics of the movie.
Done deal.
Yeah, super easy.
Nope.
No.
Nope, not at all.
Yeah. So yeah, we're not going to go through every beat of this movie. There's some big twists. In fact, there are a lot of big twists before the movie happened. Like, I guess what makes Hansen interesting is, she's a Democratic Ohio senator, but we also find out that she used to be a Republican.
To a former Republican. She comes from a Republican family. Her father was a Republican governor.
So some Democrats think she's a turncoat, and they're worried about her there.
Some Republicans think...
No. Well, okay, it works both ways. Elliott originally does not... Sam Elliott. Not Elliott from E.T.
Yeah.
No, this is Sam Elliott.
Elliott from Scrubs?
Not Elliott from Scrubs.
Elliott Page?
No, this is Sam Elliott's character. Originally says, I don't know about Hansen. Hansen's a turncoat. Once a turncoat, always a turncoat. That's what he says before Jackson says, nope, we're going Hansen and you're going to make it happen. You and Saul Rubinek. You two are going to make this happen.
Basically, Shelley Runyon, Gary Oldman, he's in charge of the committee.
A committee that, in real life, we're used to seeing the Senate take the lead on these confirmation hearings.
Yep.
They make reference to the fact that they're going to do things Rockefeller style. So Rockefeller, because, okay, so that's... In modern history, we did have an open VP vacancy a couple different times under the same presidency, actually. Basically, after Agnew resigns, Nixon resigns, and now that you have Ford as president with no VP, who... double jumped because he was a congressperson. He was a Speaker of the House. He then had to pick somebody who then, according to the 25th Amendment, has to be approved by a vote in Congress. It's a both house thing because Congress is to advise and consent, not just the Senate. And so I guess it was a House Judiciary Committee there that led things. That's why there's a House Judiciary Committee here, which is why Mr. Christian Slater, a freshman congressman.
28-year-old, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed Democrat.
Part of Shelley's machinations behind the scene is when he finds out that this Slater congressperson is very eager to join the committee, and his objectivity might be able to be replaced with, let's say, subjectivity. Mm-hmm. He's like, okay, freshman, I'll let you on if you maybe think about voting my way.
Runyon is very combative with the president's office. He's a sensitive soul. He's hurt that when Kermit and Jerry come to visit him to let him know about Lane Hansen and how the president wants a smooth sailing confirmation. Runyon's hurt that the president didn't come himself. And it turns out that there's some history there between the two men that's alluded to later in the movie.
Yes.
Whether it is that, did Runyon run for president?
They refer to
Hartford.
Yeah, they say, what you did to me in Hartford that hurt his chances to become president. So what the F did he do? Because it's not like a debate.
There could have been a debate there, but also if Runyon was, for whatever reason, the presidential candidate, that would have come up in all like the news footage that we would have seen. That's something you would have played up. But we just know something happened in Hartford.
Yes. And then speaking of things that you think would have come up earlier or come up at all, at this point is when we find out that Shelley has, let's just say he's not relying on, an FBI background check to dig up some dirt.
No, he's got some sneaky, smoky guy helping him that we only see in like one scene, right?
Yeah, they bring in a campaign backer of Hathaway to a private investigation into Hansen that the FBI check won't cover. What's the line they say? We have to gut the bitch in her belly. We will obliterate a life, but we will get you the vice president. That's what these people are saying to Hathaway.
To Hathaway. This is a legit conspiracy being set up for where Runyon is going to get Hathaway back into the position to be the vice president.
Yes.
That is what they're setting in motion to do whatever is possible to kill Lane Hansen's chances of moving through the committee.
And not just that, you're specifically working with a very rich backer to secretly finance this shadow investigation.
Yeah. They find something pretty quickly.
Well, that's what made me wonder, like, why didn't this come up earlier? Like, because part of this controversy is the fact that it was apparently a well-known thing on the campus when she was a freshman.
So basically what happens is somebody from the committee leaks to Mike Binder that they have found photos of Lane in college getting, I believe the term is gangbanged.
That's what they say. That's their words, not ours.
Not ours. So yeah, in the 80s, while at college, at a party, she is used while drunk in front of a group of people.
Ostensibly drunk, they do take a deposition. So there's a witness saying that she was drunk. She was getting gangbanged. And the photos, you don't get the clearest shot of her face, mostly because her face is always blocked by someone's crotch.
Yes.
What's interesting is that when all the flashback that we see, it's done like 16 millimeter, like 70s porn style.
It was completely unnecessary. It should have just been photos.
Especially once you know the ending. Because at no point is anyone saying these photos come from frames of a film. It's not like it's a Pruder thing.
Yeah.
The film was never there. It's never brought up.
No.
It's just a stylistic choice by Lurie that kind of confuses the matter at hand. Kermit finds out about this, and what's the first thing he does? He asks her to drop out.
Yeah. I mean, he makes a very fair statement.
The people of this nation can stomach quite a bit. The one thing they can't stomach is the image of a vice president with a mouthful of cock.
I mean, I don't know whether they polled people about this. I mean, this, I don't know. They called 100 people in Iowa.
Yeah. Her husband,
maybe he saw that on Family Feud. We polled 100 people.
What's the one thing they can't stomach?
Ding! Steve, I'm going to go with cock.
And they have to go to the judges. That close enough. And then what pops up, ding, is actually says VP/mouth/cock. They can't fit the whole thing.
Oh, that was a good episode of Family Feud.
But in this meeting, the husband's there too, and the husband's like, "You mean alleged?" And Elliott's like, "Alleged? There's photos and witnesses." And this is where she makes it clear, because she's just like, "I'm not going to even dignify the question
with
of
an
what
answer.
happened."
Yeah.
Because they're like, "Just deny it. They're going to ask you about this tomorrow. You deny it." She's like, "No.
It's simply beneath my dignity."
So the next time we meet the president is actually my favorite scene of the whole movie.
Back at the White House.
Back at the White House.
Brings in Christian Slater.
And what I like two things about it. I like the portraits. A lot of portraits.
You like the portraits? You like the shark steak sandwich? You like breaking bread?
I like the shark sandwich. Yeah, because throughout this, this is the second time now he's ordered something and told the person who he's talking to why he's ordering. He doesn't really want it. He just wants to see if he can trip them up.
I saw this movie once where the president, he's just tickled that anything he wants to eat, he can get in a moment's notice.
Like the first scene is with Hanson, and he's like, orders like a coq au vin.
Yeah.
Not a different kind of coq than Elliott was talking about in the VP's mouth. This is the coq au vin, a French dish.
Otto.
Yes, Mr. President?
Yeah, sorry for the late notice. For lunch, could you arrange some coq au vin with a side of penne?
Spicy or mild?
Spicy. And, hazelnut pudding for dessert.
No problem, sir.
One day I'll catch him napping.
And here it's a shark sandwich. And we do get some good politics out of this guy because we find out what a shrewd political player he is. He threatens Slater in the most smooth way.
In a very charming way. He tells him he could end his career. And he gives him he walks through what his future could be.
Yeah.
If he plays the game correctly.
They already figured out the only reason why Shelley would want you on this committee, a freshman congressperson, is if he knows you're going to go his way. Because you weren't even on the Democrats list. You were a Shelley specialty. So they know what's going to happen. They know which way the wind is blowing. And he says,
I envy you. I do. You know why? Because someday, years from now, you're going to come in here with your family, and you're going to look up at my painting, and you'll be able to say to them, your kids and your grandkids, that way back then, I defied my president. It cost me my re-election, kept me out of politics forever. I was on the track to maybe one day end up here, destined to make the kind of changes in this country that only great men, given the right time and place, can make. And I have none of that now, but that's okay, because I did what was in my heart.
So he's phrasing it like, I envy you for having the ability to stick to your guns. And you'll tell that story, but part of that story is going to be how you lost everything.
Yep, you're coming here as a tourist.
Yeah. The next time we see the president is a similar scene where he's meeting with Hanson and Hanson's child.
Yeah, at this point, he also wants to show off all the food to the kid, too. He's pushing cookies on the little guy.
He orders Kung Pao chicken with
Kung Pao chicken, yes. Is everybody hungry? Let's Kung Pao chicken.
Otto.
Yes, Mr. President?
Could you whip up some Kung Pao chicken, but with walnuts?
No problem.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting about Lane's kid. The kid does get in one jab at the president. They're about to take a photo together. And the kid's like,
Yeah, being the vice president is better than being the president.
Oh, I'm sure you're right.
Because nobody wants to shoot the vice president.
because no one wants to shoot the vice president.
Fair
And
enough.
he says that right before the photographer takes the shot,
Yeah.
the picture, and you get to see Evan's face just kind of, kid's
But
got a point.
Yeah, kid does have a point. Then Evans meets with Lane. They talk about Christian Slater. And actually we see that he tells Kermit to protect the kid. He's just misguided. He's not actually going to ruin his whole career over this, no matter what.
Right.
So, we see that he likes to play the game, but also that sometimes he bluffs.
Yes. This is when we cut to the Washington Post.
Well,
And
going
this-
back, can we take a step back to the scene with Lane where they talk about the sex scandal and that he says he has her
Oh.
back? Is any of this believable to you?
I mean, she's oddly solitary, and I mean, she's sticking to her guns. So it's like the second scene in a row where she's saying the same thing.
Yeah.
I'm not going to talk about it because it would be beneath my dignity. And so the president says to her, in fact, here's what's interesting about this scene. Talk about the president. It's midway through the scene. He says, okay, we know about the photo. We know what's going to come up, which is why I have to tell you something very important. And we think what he's going to say is, you're out.
Yeah.
Except that's when he suddenly remembers someone's birthday. And he calls in his secretary. So he's leaving Hanson hanging. On like, what is it? What do you have to tell me to do here? And he's like, yeah, what did I get this person for birthday? And the secretary's
Don
like, oh, you got him a
Quixote.
blank. Yeah, Don Quixote, something, like first edition. And he's like, great, that's wonderful. It'll make him really wonder why I got it for him. He likes to give gifts to make people think and to kind of fuck with people too. Then when he finally gets to finish the sentence, it's to have that conversation that we were just talking about. Basically what it comes down to is he tells her that you're going to get confirmed. The point of these hearings is to damage you, to bloody you up, to turn you into a virus in this administration.
And that it's not about, like any president, anybody who's gotten to that level, there's a lot of ego involved. So it's also like, it's not about you, it's about me.
It's about trying to destroy him, and they want to, in the process, embarrass the hell out of you.
Yep.
Which means you only have one choice,
Don't be embarrassed.
and that's his advice to her. He's sticking to her. He likes her.
This is a presidential favor.
So anyway, yeah. So how the story come out, Runyon's people leak it to this is the one forward-thinking technology part of this, because in 2000, I don't think you had yet like a Slate or a Salon, or if you did, it was very early days.
They did. I mean, those were around in the late 90s, early 2000s.
Late 90s. So basically they go to maybe a second-tier website to even them, a place that's more gossipy.
Yeah.
To tell the story. Story comes out. A Washington Post reporter shot in the actual Washington Post newsroom reads their story and says, oh, I'll just reprint that.
Yeah.
And the next thing you know, it's all in the news. And now at the very first actual hearing that's going on, Shelley has no choice. Look, I'm just bringing it up because it's out there.
Yeah.
And that starts the series of hearings that, come up.
He's like, he brings up the Libel Protection Act. He's like, I'm sure this is just so
Yeah.
you know your rights, Lane.
It's an act he wants to pass. He's like,
yeah.
if they had passed the Internet Libel Protection Act like I wanted them to, you would have more rights now if this comes out to sue and get recriminations for all these people telling these things about you, which surely must not be true. Anyway, tell us now all about it.
Yeah.
He comes into it. And then what's interesting is she has no comments.
And so they keep pushing. The next level, there's a meeting where they're like, what if she took money for the sex? What if we throw that out there? What if it's a quid pro blow?
That's just that they start to They take the photos that seemingly have at least some actual source of, I'm not going to say truth, but at least are real photos.
Yeah,
they exist.
They exist.
Yeah. They might not tell the whole story, but the photos exist. And then now the gossip machine is now embellishing and trying to turn her into basically a prostitute. Meanwhile, this is going on. There's an investigator going out and talking to Hathaway and talking to other people. And I couldn't figure out what Lurie was trying to do here, because based on her questions, she seems to be investigating the initial incident on the lake.
And then
she's also asking questions about Hansen, though.
She's not asking questions about Hansen.
Not directly. Hansen does come up.
They're framed in a way that makes you think that they're talking about Hansen.
But she does. This is also played by Catherine Morris from Cold Case. And what's the Spielberg movie? Minority Report.
That is a Spielberg movie.
No, but like there's this line in there, though, where she points out, like, oh, so you were bass fishing in this place where there's no bass. Why were you there? You're an experienced fisherman. You had some pretty good gear on you. So she's already trying to crack holes in this story, which felt like way too soon to be doing that. But anyway, that's ongoing.
Everything keeps going worse and worse and worse for Lane.
It also comes out that her husband, who's her campaign manager, was married when they first started having sex. Muriel Hemingway plays the scorned wife who was brought into the hearing to testify.
And they were friends.
And what's interesting here is earlier in the hearing, she says, I've never committed adultery. And so the question now before Evans and Elliott and them is, well, she lied. She was an adulterer, to which, no, technically she's not. And this is where Jackson, a lawyer, splits hairs.
Although at first he's pissed.
He's pissed.
He thinks this is it.
He thinks this is it. And Elliott's the one who's like, you're an adulterer, and she's like, no, I'm not an adulterer. I was not married. That was a true statement I made in the hearing. And then she's like, well, you're not an adulterer. You're a homewrecker. Same difference. But the president does come to her defense in that regard. And she winds up actually speaking to the press about this moment, seemingly because she feels bad about Muriel Hemingway.
Yeah, bad best friend.
And so she winds up saying something to the effect of, love is an involuntary reflex.
The heart wants what it wants. I mean, Woody said it best.
Yeah. Love is an involuntary reflex. And she also wants to say she's sorry to Muriel Hemingway. So she's seemingly using the press as a vessel to say she's sorry. That said, she's talking about her sexual past, the things she said she'd never do to the press. So a little incongruency there.
Motherfucker, I'm not asking if you're interested. I'm the president of the United fucking States, man.
And so we get to see more of this chess game going on between Evans and Runyon at a certain point when things look the absolute worst for Lane. Like she can't get beyond this. It looks like the president's ready to throw in the towel. And he meets with Runyon on a boat.
But before Runyon and Evans have dinner on the boat, we get a little scene with Kermit going onto a helicopter. We get some information about the POTUS, about his approval rating is down 23%. We find out that Lane Hansen's approval rating is in the 30s. And this is also where he gets a folder from Catherine Morris.
And a speech from Catherine Morris.
It's a very West Wingy type of scene. This might be inappropriate for me to say, but... And then she gives a wonderful speech about why Lane Hansen needs to continue on through this process and as a woman and all so that. Much. And Kermit just smiles, goes, you're right. That is inappropriate.
Yeah, and then the helicopter takes off. Then we get to the dinner with Runyon, where we think that the president is going to lose this chess match and that Lane has been a pawn between this entire time.
Yeah.
Except...
and during this is where I guess Runyon did run for president. Because we have the line from Evans, I may have taken the presidency from you, Shell, but you one-upped me. You took away my legacy.
Yeah, in Hartford. So these two longtime foes playing chess. It looks like Runyon is going to win this chess match. But this is when we find out that this is not a game of chess.
And not only that is Runyon going to win the chess match, Evans says that if he gets a smooth ride, we'll put Hathaway in there.
Well, that's just it.
Shell, you need to come out and say, Hathaway is the guy.
This is the change in metaphor. This is what I like about the script. This is why I want to focus on it, because this is a smart thing Lurie does. He has them talking about chess in relation to Lane and poker in relation to Slater's character, Webster, and the fact that his boss was a bad poker player.
Now, Truman, he was a poker player, damn fine one as I understand it.
And it's when we realize that this scene is not a payoff to the chess runner. It's a payoff to the poker runner, where Jackson's earlier talking about how he always loved playing poker against Slater's predecessor because he always walked away with $1,000. Yeah. And he considers himself a very good poker player because what he's doing here, he's not bluffing. Bluffing is when you pretend like you have a stronger hand than you really have. He's slow playing Runyon. He's making him think he has a weaker hand than he has. So that Runyon, now from a position of strength, feels like
he could go all in.
Go all in. And he does. Evans traps him into fully committing publicly to Hathaway on the record on the grounds that I will pull out Lane if you've already cleared the runway for Hathaway. So that's what happens first. He stakes his career to Hathaway as he's walking into a state dinner at the White House. And at the state dinner, before it's even really commenced, that's when...
They have a little meeting. They have a little meeting at the Oval Office.
In the Oval Office, it's the president, it's Elliott, it's Hansen, it's Runyon. It's Hathaway.
Yep. We got all the players in the room. Something's ready to pop. Something's ready to happen. But first, first, Evans, he needs some food for his belly.
Yes.
He with the state dinner, there's never anything for them to eat. You know, he's always working the room. He doesn't have time to eat. So he orders himself a grilled cheese with Munster.
And we finally get a payoff to that runner. Because what does the White House chef say?
We've run out of Munster.
So for the first time, the whole movie, he does not get what he wants. He gets the shark, gets the coq au vin, gets the kung pao chicken with walnuts. But he doesn't get his grilled cheese sandwich. And so it's in this Oval Office scene, we get two things of note. One is we get a brilliant view of the presidential ceiling. Like, I don't know if we've seen the ceiling of the Oval Office before with this nice big seal on it, but it was a great shot, and I'm glad they built it and did it. And of course, the other thing is they arrest Hathaway on the spot because what do they find out?
Well, that he paid the woman to drive off the bridge in the top of the movie so that he could save her in front of the reporter. And Jackson is great in this scene. Jeff Bridges is great in this scene because he just gives a, you fucked up, buddy. And they are ready to arrest Hathaway there in the Oval Office on the charges of negligent homicide.
And so after the state dinner, that's when we get the president and Hansen sneaking off to go have a little heart-to-heart.
Smoke a little stogie on the front lawn of the White House.
They're on the White House lawn.
Just the two of them. Nobody around.
Backlit by the glistening white paint of the White House, very well lit. They're in shadow, lit only by seemingly the moonlight. It's a very evocative, very striking image of way to film. And it didn't feel like green screen. It felt like they actually were outside a building that matches the White House to a T, more so than a lot of these movies. Yeah. There's no Secret Service to be seen, which I was like, wait, where are they? And we find out later, they really did sneak away.
Yeah.
And this is where the president tells her that I just want to know what really happened.
We get a little president joke at the top of the scene with the stogies. She coughs, and he tells her, you're not supposed to inhale. Clinton joke.
Yeah,
there.
and by the way, we kind of glossed over all the Clinton stuff. They talk about Clinton a lot in here.
Yeah, well, she voted to impeach him.
When she was in the House of Reps, she voted to impeach. And when she's called on it, why did you vote to impeach, even though he didn't technically break the law in her mind? It's because he's not guilty, but he is responsible. And so that phrase does come up numerous times throughout. She feels guilty about the affair that her campaign manager had on his wife. Even though she wasn't married at the time, she feels she's not guilty of committing adultery, but she is responsible for his. You know, she says that there. And then at the very end, that does come up one more time when after the president gets one over on Shelley calls him manipulative. You know, how dare you? This is beneath you. And to which Jackson replies, well, I guess you can say I'm not guilty, but I am responsible for what's about to happen to you. So it's this weird 3-step arc where it goes from condemning Clinton to sympathizing with Clinton to then almost absolving Clinton.
Well, the question is, was it anybody's business?
Yeah, well, that's where we get to now on the White House lawn. He just wants to know what happened. And we do find out what happened.
She's like, she was there. She was told that in order to get into a sorority, she would have to sleep with some guys from this other fraternity. And she didn't want to do it. And then she got a little drunk and she thought she would do it. And then when she stepped up to bat, per se, she made a little joke about one of the guy's wangs and didn't go through with it.
She says, I grabbed his cock and I leaned over into it and I said, I don't smoke.
Yeah.
And then she lets go of it and leaves.
Yep. And then they just gangbang some other girl. And even though that one might look like her, she doesn't have the birthmark that she does have on her thigh.
To which the president's like, well, if that's all that happens, now why didn't you really ever say anything? And again, she sticks to it because they never should have asked the question. The question should never even be there. And then we get to the ending where seemingly, because of all the damage, it does not look like she's going to pass. She's hanging out with her husband, going to go for her cemetery jog. He's doing a joint session of Congress. We hear on the radio that it's going to be to basically announce that Lane's out.
Malloy is in.
That's what the word on the street is. And he gives this joint session speech to Congress.
He specifically calls out Runyon and gives a good old "have you no decency, sir?" To which
Runyon stands up and leaves.
He says that hate and ego have no place in the chapel of democracy, the chapel which Lane refers to government as a church of sorts, her church earlier in the movie. And he says that while Lane Hansen has withdrawn her name, I don't accept it. And he calls for an immediate vote of confirmation, a live roll call.
So that everyone can have their voices and faces aligned with their vote about history, because this president, he's willing to stake his legacy on her greatness. And when tomorrow is the first day of the rest of your life, you don't want to wait. That's a different movie, right?
Yeah,
that's
different movie.
Okay.
You're good with remembering those lines, man. He does want to explode into the new millennium, which is like, well, that's kind of graphic based off of everything we've talked about.
Well, also not accurate if we're already like in the year 2010.
Exactly. But anyway, the movie ends. Lane is back. The end.
How dare you come into this office and bark at me like some little junkyard dog? I am the President of the United States.
Okay, before we break this all down, I know we're running long. I just have to do my little diatribe here.
Please.
Because this movie did piss me off in one regard.
Uh-oh.
Joan Allen has no fucking story. Like, it's ostensibly a vehicle for her. Rod Lurie says, I wrote the part for her. She doesn't, and I'm not saying you have to have an arc where you start off doing A and you wind up realizing that A is wrong and now you're going to do B. There's a lot of great movies that don't do that. Like, Ferris Bueller, he never changes at all. So I'm not saying you have to have an arc. But what's interesting is that the very framing of this movie always keeps Joan Allen pushed to the margins. She's never totally in the center. People talk to her, people talk about her, but she's oddly passive throughout the whole movie.
She's an idea as opposed to a character.
Yeah, she's a MacGuffin, and part that's by design because of her resolve not to do something. It's very hard to do a movie about somebody not doing something. But the movie also sidelines her inadvertently through its framing device. It opens with an action sequence with William Peterson. William Peterson's character, his scandal is what winds up breaking the story open. All the machinations from other people is what's always keeping things going. And so not only do you wind up with a movie about a vice presidential candidate who the movie is not really even about, but she doesn't even get a whole lot of screen time. And as a result, here's my biggest damnation, Ben.
Uh-oh.
I'm not even sure this movie passes the Bechdel test.
Two women have a conversation.
Two named women have a conversation about something other than a man. Does she even have a conversation with another woman at any point in this movie? So anyway, I just had to get that out of the way. But now we can get into politics of this movie. What party do you think the president is, Ben?
They give us everything in this movie. They give us everything.
Jackson, he's definitely always been a Democrat, never strayed. We do know that he was a lawyer. We do know that he was in the Senate too at some point.
Yeah, I think he was a senator, was his way up. I don't think he was a governor.
Yeah.
He's a deal maker.
Wasn't a governor.
Big, even though LBJ wasn't a senator, he kind of gives that vibe to me.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because, to me, when I saw it, I kept thinking, oh, he's just a stand-in for Clinton, which is weird because he keeps talking about Clinton, so he went from a Clinton to a Clinton. But rewatching it now, I do see the differences more. Bridges said he based the character on his own father, Lloyd Bridges, which is interesting because he also played a fake president in Hot Shots Part 2.
Part 2.
So I want to specifically believe that was the performance of his dad that he was showing.
They exist in the same universe. Hot Shots
seemingly,
and The Contender.
Speaking of governors, though, Lane's father is a governor, and we know that he was big on keeping the church and state separated as governor, as a Republican governor. And that comes up in her hearings.
Yeah, well, you think of it, he wasn't a governor in the 90s, 2000s during he was a governor in the 70s.
80. Well, if he was able to
70s and early 80s.
We know she voted to impeach him as a rep in, that would have been, 97, 98?
Yeah.
And then at some point she would have gotten elected and then reelected, because they do make reference to 7 years since
it
that
also
first
said
election.
that she changed parties from Republican to Democrat when she entered the Senate.
Yes.
When she ran
so
for
she
Senate.
She was a Republican when she voted to impeach, and then when she ran for Senate, which would have been no sooner than like that very next election cycle. So assuming she went straight from I'm voting to impeach to I'm now a Democrat, which stretches the credibility there. But it's possible by the year 2000, she was already running for Senate, and then if she wins and gets reelected in 2006. And we know that 7 years have passed since that first election, because they do make reference to that. We know that this movie takes place. This is 2007 at least.
Yeah, but truly, it would actually probably be at least 2010. You figure it goes Republican in 2000, and then Jackson Evans wins in 2004, reelected in 2008, and so this is now 2010.
Yeah, it's got to be. When you line it up then with that, which would then mean that the guy was governor probably into the 90s, if not early 2000s even, possibly. So which is very late to be a Republican who is for the separation of church and state.
But
unless
if it's Ohio.
Yeah, Ohio and not Massachusetts.
Which is purple.
More purple back then.
Yeah.
It's just weird politics because and then they established she's an atheist. That's when she mentioned her church is the Church of Democracy, which my guess is that's why she switched parties, was her lack of faith. But anyway, let's take the presidential politics, Democrats. We know that he does, even though she's a turncoat, we know that he does align with what she's into, a laundry list of very progressive causes that she is into.
He gives a little speech.
I stand for a woman's right to choose. I stand for the elimination of the death penalty. I stand for strong and growing armed forces because we must stomp out genocide on this planet, and I believe that is a cause worth dying for. I stand for seeing every gun taken out of every home, period. I stand for making the selling of cigarettes to our youth a federal offense. I stand for term limits and campaign reform. And Mr. Chairman, I stand for the separation of church and state, and the reason that I stand for that is the same reason that I believe our forefathers did. It is not there to protect religion from the grasp of government, but to protect our government from the grasp of religious fanaticism. Now, I may be an atheist, but that does not mean I do not go to church. I do go to church. The church I go to is the one that emancipated the slaves, that gave women the right to vote. It gave us every freedom that we hold dear. My church is this very chapel of democracy that we sit in together, and I do not need God to tell me what are my moral absolutes. I need my heart, my brain, and this church.
In her closing before the hearing, she says she stands for the elimination of the death penalty.
Term limits?
For the right to choose, for term limits, for strong armed forces to stamp out genocide, which is clearly a reference to the 90s, like Bosnia,
Rwanda,
in Rwanda. The removal of guns from all homes, from making the selling of cigarettes to youth a federal offense, term limits, as you mentioned, and campaign finance reform for the separation of church and state. And yes, this is when she says that although she is an atheist, she does go to church.
The church I go to is the one that emancipated the slaves, that gave women the right to vote. It gave us every freedom that we hold dear.
Her church is the Church of Democracy. And so assuming all that's out there and known, the president was very happy to say that's my VP. All those things are things I'm happy to have in my administration.
My legacy.
Yes. I would love to one day ask Rod Lurie, in your mind, did she get it or not?
And not only did she get it, does she run for president?
Yeah.
That's also like he's setting up the future of the party. He is a consummate politician. He knows what to say to everybody.
Yeah.
So, the soft pat on somebody's back to Hathaway is like, you're the future of the party. To Malloy, he thinks he's the future of the party. But, for any president, they believe that they can establish who really is the future of the party. And that's what he's setting up.
This takes us into what this says about the year 2000, the year it was made. Oddly, what it really talks about is the year 2024. Because what you said right there, that's clearly what Biden was doing.
Yes.
Like the year 2000. So what does this say about 2000?
I think the question is a quote more from the year 2016 or 2000. I don't know when Michelle Obama said it, but it is when they go low, we go high. And how should you approach allegations? And it feels like Rod Lurie is saying, like, you shouldn't dignify that stuff with an answer.
Yes.
And I don't know whether that's also advice for what Clinton should have done during that time frame, whether he should have brushed it off even harder. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, either as a way to push allegations to the side, whether they're false or not, but also it seems that a non-answer to allegations like that feels like a lie to me. It feels as if, to me, if you're willing not to tell us what really happened, that means that you could be compromised in some way.
Yes. Compromat, I believe, is the word, Ben.
Yes. Yeah. So I feel that's what he's trying to say is that you turn the other cheek and you move forward and it's the best idea will win. I think we've seen that is not the case.
Even back then, I don't even know the 2000 election would have borne that out because this was clearly done before Bush v. Gore. Yeah, so I guess, my take on it is, in many ways, it was very forward-thinking. There's parts of this that are resonating with politics today, parts of it that feel super dated. I get why, on a limited budget, if you're sitting in movies seeming in 10 years in the future, you don't want to actually spend any production value on holographic phones.
Flying cars. That would have been amazing if that would have been the one thing, at the very end. He gets into a limo and we think it's like the Beast and the wheels fold up and it flies into the air.
It's in Back to the Future Part 3. He gets on the presidential train.
How? Because I'm the goddamn president of the United States of America.
Legacy. We know what he wanted it to be. Will that be his legacy?
Ultimately, yeah. I think Mr. President Jackson Evans comes out on top in this. He gets the person he wanted. He gets a great speech. He might even run Runyon out of office with this.
Possibly, yeah.
And any of his enemies are gone. He gets favors in the future. I think the crime bill passed. Everything he wants in his last year and a half in office happens. I think his approval rating rockets right back up. That 23% drop is a blip.
Which takes us into approval ratings, because that's interesting. Because when they mention that, they say the president's approval ratings have dropped 23%, and then they say hers are in the 30s, which to me implies his aren't in the 30s, or they said they're both in the 30s.
Yep.
So either he dropped 40 to the 20s, or he was in the 40s, which means at one point he was in the 60s?
Yeah, you get probably some goodwill following the death of the VP. Everybody feels bad for you. You probably gave a really good speech, really good eulogy.
Ah, so he was on the VP
over at Arlington. You look super presidential.
Interesting. So you're saying he peaked when the VP died. And
it is a win when your VP dies. Well, what do you think? What do you think are approval ratings on?
No, I just have to go by that. They give us the numbers. I'm going to have to say, I'll say 63 on the,
Oh, wait, one more thing about the president. For a guy who really cares about his legacy, getting the first female VP in, there's not a lot of women in his inner circle.
None.
Yeah. There's nary a woman with any power around him.
His secretary who reminds him that someone's birthday is coming up.
Yeah.
We don't meet a wife. We don't meet a daughter.
Nope. Don't meet an intern.
I know you don't want to force it in there, if it's not needed. But that said, when they're talking about who his VP should be, that's the perfect chance to say, well, she's got a husband and a kid, and you don't have either of those things, Mr. President. Ways to balance it out. Do things that we know about, but they don't even do that.
Not even, he could have worn just a girl dad hat, a hashtag girl dad hat.
But,
would have gone a long way with establishing who he is. That's what I do in all of my scripts when I want somebody to know that they're
written by a guy.
Father of women.
Thank you for watching. I've been Eric Buckman.
I've been Ben Oren. This has been Fake Presidents. We want to thank
Aiden Comedy on
Aiden
Threads.
Comedy for suggesting this movie. Who else do we want to thank? Johnny Sadoff for the music.
I'd like to thank our families, our wives, our daughters.
Hashtag, we're both wearing our girl dad hats right now.
Yes. Everyone have a happy rest of your month.
Yeah, enjoy going online and subscribing and rating our podcast. You could email. The reason we did The Contender is because somebody wrote us an email, and you could also write us an email at fakepresidents@gmail.com.
Yes, and we're also on Threads and Blue Sky at the moment, and Instagram. That's also where you can interact with us, give us suggestions and questions. Next month, I mean, a lot's happening. We've got the Sterling K. Brown TV series coming out. We got Captain America: Brave New World coming out with Harrison Ford back in the White House. There's apparently, we just saw a trailer out of nowhere for a series with Angela Bassett and Robert De Niro, where they're both playing presidents.
There's a lot going on.
Yeah, and that's not even including the other stuff that was on our radar for coming up.
Well, I feel like we don't do a President's Day episode, and we just we got all this good, like, new content to consume.
Maybe President's Day weekend, we might have
a pillow fight?
A reaction.
Yes.
No, yeah. Maybe if we can get that together fast enough, we can do it in 2 days.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you all for tuning in.
Bye.
Bye.
But this is a good movie for us to talk about. It actually worked out great because we're going through actual confirmation hearings now.
But we won't talk about the actual confirmation hearings at all.
Because they're just too damn depressing. Joan Allen as the actress is as qualified as some of these people. An old DVD of The Contender bought at a bankruptcy auction from Blockbuster is as qualified as many of these candidates. But we're not going to talk about it. We're not going to talk about it.